They're out, but it's far from over. After 2 months of will he or won't he, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau finally kicked former Cabinet Ministers Jody Wilson-Raybould and Dr. Jane Philpott out of the Liberal caucus. But both of these two former ministers who were stars in the Liberal Cabinet constellation have said an apology or an admission of improper pressure would have ended all this a lot sooner. So did the Prime Minister do the right thing by kicking them out? Was Jane Philpott guilty by association? After all, she never secretly taped anyone. Does this end the controversy? Let's dig into this. The scrum is here. What a week for the scrum. Bob Fife is the bureau chief for the Globe and Mail. Joyce Napier is CTV's Ottawa bureau chief. Craig Oliver is CTV's chief political commentator. And our special guest is the former director of communications for Jean Chrétien, Mr. Peter Donolo. All right, everyone. Let me start with Mr. Donolo. This is your business. What have you made of the crisis management of the Trudeau government and ending up tossing these high-profile ministers out?
I'm not sure that it was the right thing to kick them out of caucus, to be quite honest. I think it bought the PM some peace with his own caucus, but I think it looks terrible for the public. It furthers the victimization narrative of both ministers, both former ministers, particularly Jody Wilson-Raybould. And listen, they've launched a star with her. She's now the second most famous politician in Canada, period. Yeah. Most of the Trudeau cabinet couldn't get picked up, picked in the lineup. But she's a household name now. So where that's going to go, we don't know.
Bob Fife, Justin Trudeau thinks kicking them out ends it. Is the public experiencing that a little differently than he is?
Well, no, I do actually think that this story is going to die out now. Ms. Wilson-Raybould, unless the Prime Minister's office continues to throw more fuel on the fire, which they seem to constantly do, I think Ms. Wilson-Raybould has said that she's had her say.
Like they've run out of bullets.
That they've run out of bullets, and that they want to move on with their own lives and figure out what they're going to do, whether they're going to stay in politics or not stay in politics. It really is going to be up to the Prime Minister's office or the people around him who continually try to discredit her and keep the story alive, which to me has been the untold story, really, that everybody in this town is talking about. Is the total incompetence of the Prime Minister's office in dealing with a crisis like this. And if they're going to get out of this and have a chance of winning the next election campaign, I think they really need to get some pros in that Prime Minister's office, people like Donolo, who actually knows how to deal with crisis management.
Stop it, Bob.
Yeah. You might be recruited, Craig.
As you sift through the remains of the day and you're a Liberal, what are you left with? Probably the biggest debacle for any national government in at least a generation. The Prime Minister has lost his top advisors. He's lost his two most popular and some would say competent ministers. His own credibility has been badly undermined. His government now, whether it's winnable for them, the question is it sustainable? This is just about as bad as it gets, and Liberals don't have very much to feel very good about.
Well, okay, so Joyce, let me go to you, because the Liberals have said that Jody Wilson-Raybould her credibility took a hit with the secret taping. Now, she said, why are you focusing on that I tape? What about focusing on the content? But has her credibility taken a hit? In other words, has the story changed a bit and her halo may have been drained of some of the gold?
Well, I think actually, yeah. The short answer is yes. The tape recording, I think, shocked a few people. And, I think people who had made up their mind are questioning now that particular, action. That's the first one. And the second one is, this was all about speaking the truth. And then we found out last week that actually the truth is negotiable. And I think the truth is the truth, and it's not negotiable. I mean the conditions. So, yes, I would like an apology, but bundled in there, I would also like a few people fired. And I think that perhaps, look, this is an ugly war. Civil wars are the bloodiest and the ugliest ones in history. So this is a civil war within the Liberal Party. And so obviously it's going to be ugly, and it's going to be a lot of dirty laundry washed in public. But we do find out that, the sainthood is probably not that clean. If indeed this truth is negotiable, then it isn't that noble.
Peter Donolo, you've been there. How typical is it because Jane Philpott and Jody Wilson-Raybould have not verified the story that they were demands, just to be clear, but sources have told multiple media organizations there were demands. How typical would it be for someone like Jody Wilson-Raybould to say, you know what, these people have done something wrong. You got to get rid of these people on the condition that I'll take another job. What did you make of that?
Well, listen, I don't believe that ministers can make demands about how the Prime Minister runs the government. If they can convince the Prime Minister based on the merits of the case, so be it. But, you know, making demands or blackmailing or threats, I don't think works with any Prime Minister. I wouldn't advise it as a career move on the part of a minister. I don't know if this story is true. It is kind of funny that those so-called demands, 2 or 3 of them ended up taking place anyway, with people leaving. But I don't know. I have a hard time picturing that. I have a hard time seeing a Prime Minister's office bow to it.
Well, first of all, we don't know whether it's true. It's coming from people on the Trudeau side. And we don't know if, in fact, if this is true, what demands did Mr. Trudeau have? Come out there and deny the story that there was any inappropriate pressure? But whatever the case is, if it is true, she certainly seemed to have, her game plan seemed to work, because Butts is gone, the clerk is gone, you know, and the whole issue of an apology, she's publicly said he should have apologized. And frankly, if he had apologized a long time ago and said, you know, on reflection, my staff shouldn't have put pressure on the Attorney General the way she did. I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again, and I'm sorry for it. This story would have been long gone, long time ago.
The trouble is, he said from the beginning
it was
that
false.
they were innocent. They were innocent of any wrongdoing.
But he said it was
Once
false.
he had said that,
Yeah.
he had nowhere to go.
And then the story kept changing. He blamed it on Scott Bryson.
It got worse and worse, and he couldn't back off that insistence that his government hadn't done anything particular wrong and had not pressured her. Nobody believes they didn't pressure her.
No.
They have
and
not.
that begs the question. That begs the question, because David Lametti we still haven't gotten a signal from David Lametti about whether he's going to go ahead with the deferred prosecution agreement or not. And it seems to me, you know, by letting this hang out there for a long time, they should get off the pot. Either go ahead and do it because they've actually made the case about why it's the right thing to do, or don't do it if it's too toxic, but don't leave it hanging out there.
Peter, as you said earlier, the Prime Minister's office is probably not going to write this one up as how to do crisis management 101. But you've been there. If you had any advice on how to handle this now going forward, what would you say?
Well, first of all, stop leaking stuff that trying to make Jody Wilson-Raybould look bad. Every time they've done it, it's been like something it's been like Wile E. Coyote in the Roadrunner. Every time they've tried it, it blows up in their face. And it ends up backfiring. They look bad, and it just further enhances her. So they should stop that if they are doing it. But you know, the bit about the Supreme Court justice last week, if this is true, what Bob says, that the rumors about the story about her 4 conditions actually came from the PM's supporters, that's a mistake. So stop that. And the other thing is change the subject. It's not like there aren't a ton of other controversial issues in this country where the Liberals could take a stand that wedge in their direction, and they should. There's a ton of issues. Everything from Canada-U.S. relations. Look at the whole issue of the Religious Symbols Act in Quebec. There's a whole phalanx of issues they could go on. I'll be honest with you, a little trade secret. When we used to get in trouble, that's what we would do. We'd change the subject by putting something equally controversial on the table, and everyone would run towards that. It'll be pick an issue where the Conservatives will start frothing at the mouth and have another big debate, but on something that wedges in the Liberals' favor.
Well, it happens in my house a lot where you lose the channel changer. I guess they've lost it up in that building behind me. Peter Donolo, thank you so much. We'll find out if they can change the channel.